Hey guys, Winter here, back with a little bit of an update. Recently, yesterday, the Legacy of the Void beta had a balance update preview on May 11th. I'm just going to go over it real quick. I like having somewhere that everybody can look to, ask for my thoughts on something like this. So make sure to leave questions in the comments or anything you would like me to expand upon. But just to go over it real quick, I mean, it's pretty extensive actually, so this could take a little while, but I'll just go over my thoughts on each change and either how it affects the game itself or the balance or anything like that. And I'll try to keep it short, but you guys know me. It could take a while. So first off, in-game clock. First, we'd like to inquire once more on the in-game clock changing in real time. The change is looking positive so far, so we'd like to start thinking about committing to making this change for Legacy of the Void. I honestly like starting out. I like that they're changing it, but of course, they expand. We see the advantages and disadvantages of going either way, and we'd love to rely on you to make a call this area that you feel is best. The only thing we must avoid is having an option to go back and forth between the HOTS clock and real-time clock. That makes a lot of sense. Viewing various events that are using different clocks. The in-game clock, for those of you who do not know or don't really think about on a regular basis, Starcraft is played in faster time as opposed to normal time. Because it's played on faster speed, it means that that one real-time second is less than, one StarCraft second is significantly quicker than one real-time second. It's only 42 real-time seconds per one in-game minute. So the reason this is because back in the day, games were played on normal, but then someone decided it would be more competitive to play on faster, which of course is faster than normal time. And it's been ever since that everything's been played at faster speed. But I really like the idea to go back to real-time clocks. This confuses a lot of people. Like 8 p.m. is actually technically higher than you might think it is because it's real-time versus StarCraft time. A lot of other things. It's going to make the upgrade times and build times of a lot of units a little bit weird. Like instead of 24 seconds or like 110 seconds to get speed, it's like 87 now or something like that. But at the end of the day, I think having a real-time clock is going to make a much better spectator experience. For a player experience, I don't think, especially for newer players, it's going to have any effect. It's only the top-level players that are kind of used to the normal clock that are going to have too much of an issue. But I think this is a positive change. I think it's definitely something I would like to have in Legacy. I think the real-time clock is the right direction. Automated tournament by game length. The second thing we also want to address also relates to... whatever, that sentence. As you likely know, the StarCraft 2 development team is currently working on an automated tournament feature, which is amazing. Just as it was in Warcraft 3 automated tournaments. So the technology is obviously there. We can't have two people that play for hours and drag out a result for everyone else in the same automated tournament. Notice they're talking about the automated tournament as opposed to actual tournaments, because obviously you don't want to just cut someone off at a time limit in an actual tournament game, like a LAN or something like that, not a small automated tourney for like Gold League or Platinum League or whatever, which I'm excited for the fact that this is going to happen in the first place, but I think this is a good idea. Just thinking about it at the start so far, I like it. At which point the winner is determined by whichever player earned more XP in that game. Now, of course, the timing and the number isn't final, and the XP and just how someone wins is... it'll make for a little bit weird games, for games that get drawn out, of course, because people will start racing to gain XP or whatever instead of going for winning the game itself most of the time, but... this will also probably come with an overhaul in how experience points work and make them more useful rather than just have random numbers that give you things that aren't really that amazing and help you level up to something that doesn't really matter. So, but I'd like to see XP be worth something, or even outside of this be expanded upon. No one's really talking about it because no one really cares about levels, right? Especially in the professional scene, but it's an interesting way to go about determining the winner. So we'll have to see how that goes. Stalemate limits. When exploring the specific concept for automated tournaments, once again, we also wondered if every melee game in StarCraft 2 should also have a rule to prevent long, boring, dragged-out games in the future. They learned from the Swarm host, is what they're saying. We believe with the Swarm host fix, as well as how many changes in Legacy of the Void cater towards heavily aggressive play. This is true. The chances of 2 to 3 hour games happening in the future is quite low, but somebody's going to figure it out. We all know they are. However, we also know that some dragged out games have happened due to players trolling or other player behaviors that cannot be controlled, Villa. To avoid this, We are considering putting a time limit on standard melee games. I think they're talking to ladder. Or, I don't know if that's going to include tournament games there, but since this seems to be the longest a legitimate game could go. Pretty much when you've mined out of the entire map and you've stopped attacking each other because you can't anymore, is what they're saying. We're only beginning to consider this idea, and we wanted to hear your thoughts on the subject in order to make it a better decision. I mean, I don't know if I like just hard limits like that to it, but that's definitely the right idea. Maybe be a little bit more lenient past a certain timing. Maybe a softer stalemate timer, because, you know, the stalemate timer right now, it includes when you're not mining or any units have been killed. Maybe after an hour and a half, it's when neither player is mining, then the stalemate, well, the timer speeds up based on how much mining there is or something like that. If there's no mining left, like if there are no resources left to mine on the map, then maybe the stalemate happens a lot quicker. Like instead of 3 minutes, it's 1 minute timer when nothing is killed or anything like that. So that could be an interesting point there, but I don't really play. I can't remember the last time I played a 1.5 hour game. Probably a few months ago against a turtleneck player who floated all his buildings. So I think they got a point on that one, but let's go to the actual balance changes here, which are pretty interesting. I've already kind of read through them, had some opinions on them, but I want to kind of think through them right now, if that makes sense. But the Mothership core and the Mothership. Mass recall reduced from 100 to 50 energy. This is a pretty big one. With the resource changes in Legacy of the Void, we agree that Protoss seems to be struggling the most when it comes to defending bases at various locations. We believe that decreasing the cost of mass recall is a good change, and that it will both help Protoss players defend multiple bases easier and also allow them to play more aggressively throughout the early mid stages of the game. Recall is a pretty cool ability. I think this is a step in the right direction, because what they're trying to do with Legacy of the Void, no more death balls, no more sitting back, just taking 2 or 3 bases and then moving out with an almost unkillable army. I like that they're focusing on mobility. I don't know if this is the way to do it, but I really like the focus on early mid-game and mid-game instead of mid to late and late game, because obviously everything here is designed to make games quicker, more expanding, more aggression, stuff like that. And recall is a cool ability for moving your units around the map. I don't know if recall is the best way to do this. Obviously a buff or something to photon overcharge. This is kind of a defensive thing. They mentioned defensive here. And of course the weakness right now of Protoss and Legacy of the Void is it's vulnerable to so many different points of aggression. Like Zerg has the potential to attack like flying flying locusts and burrowed units everywhere and everything like that. It's almost impossible to have your army in all the right spaces at all the right times very quickly. Same goes for Terran with drops that just pick apart, since Protoss has reduced options for splash damage, at least early on, because the Disruptor is pretty easy to micro against, especially when their armies in low numbers. Colossi have been nerfed, and Storm is still very difficult to get to early in the game. Protoss struggles to get a third base. So without getting a third base, you can't really compete with the tech options of Terran or Zerg. So as an option to both kind of cut down on your opponent's economy with 50 energy, this is also very important because you have the potential to be able to time warp and then recall pretty quickly. Like, you have to have 200 energy to time warp and recall. In order to execute a strong attack, you usually need to have at least 1 time warp early on, especially against Zerg, where if you don't have a time warp, then it's very unlikely you're going to be able to do a very strong attack, especially against someone who's getting lurkers pretty quickly or something like that. Now, it's not for the lurkers, but it's mostly just so you can get your force fields better or just get in a better position a little bit easier to get damage done. So I do like the change. I don't know if it's the right one for what they want to do, but I like the idea they have there, at least behind it. I'm going to have to play around with it pretty soon in the beta. And, of course, a semi-related change, the Mothership. Movement speed increased from 1.41 to 1.88 to match the Mothership core. It's a pretty significant increase mathematically there. And same abilities as Mothership core plus Cloaking Field. Wait a second. Does that mean the Mothership now has Photon Overcharge, I believe? I think so. Yeah. Because previously, the Mothership did not have access to Photon Overcharge. It only had Time Warp and Recall. So now, not only is it going to have a quicker and cheaper recall, well, not quicker recall, but I guess quicker in the fact that you can move the mothership with your army a lot easier, because a mothership is notoriously slow. I guess they modeled it after your mother, but at this point, yeah, it's definitely that end game unit instead of something you actually use in the mid game, and that's a lot of the reason you don't see it ever in StarCraft, because it's just so hard to get to. And when you do get it, it's just a big vulnerable. It's pretty much a Hail Mary a lot of the time. When you see a mothership, it's like, well, either we're turtled and it's a stalemate, or I'm really hoping he doesn't have detection, and that's mostly because the functionality of the mothership is pretty poor besides the cloaking field. But with the addition of a cheaper recall and it moves faster, I mean, I love the mothership. It's a fun unit. Everybody loves the mothership. It's cool. I'd love to see more motherships, and this is definitely going to see more motherships. I'm going to make more motherships, so. All right. Now moving on to one I don't like, sadly. I understand. I don't like it, but I understand. Forced autocast on Oracle Stasis. We're seeing certain strategies with the Oracle Stasis ability where players are stacking the ability several times and then manually detonating them over time to infinitely leave units in stasis. I have done this. With our focus on constant combat, this is obviously something that we have no desire for, and this should effectively end this behavior. The problem with this and the forced autocast is it's going to make Stasis Ward useless for the most part. It's going to have the surprise factor, but against an intelligent player, they should be able to force out the Stasis Ward. Of course, it's kind of like a Widow Mine where that you can use your units to kind of zone them out and make sure they don't trigger. It triggers instantaneously, though. Unlike a Widow Mine, as soon as something runs in the stasis field, bam, stasis right there. One Zergling, instantly, instead of taking a couple seconds to lock on like a Widow Mine does. I would like to see something in between here. Because if you activate autocast, it's 50 energy on the Oracle. That's a pretty significant investment. I would rather see something like a mobile time warp. I know the Mothership Core already has a time warp. Something either instead of stasis or something in between forced autocast. Maybe make it so an Oracle can only have one, maybe two stasis wards out at once. I think that will be pretty solid. So that way you'd have to invest 3+ Oracles to get 3+ stasis wards out. It'd still make it cost 50 energy or something, but I think forcing autocast actually just pretty much throws most of the advantage of stasis out the window, unless you want some desperation moves like just hoping they won't prepare for a stasis ward or something like that. But any smart player realizing stasis is a possibility, you can actually see the stasis ward kind of like you can see an observer in the air. It's going to a forced autocast pretty much removes the ability as effective, just in general. So we'll have to see if that stays as is or it's going to get changed up. I'd like to see it changed in a different way. Like 1 ward per Oracle seems good to me. A good middle ground between. As opposed to having like 6-7 wards out with 2 Oracles eventually. Which does happen if you have enough time to do so. Now we've got the Broodlord. Which is in, well, they don't actually separate the units here. Some kind of random order. Anyways. Not a single thing for Terran here. I think they're really working on the new Terran unit, by the way. I think they go over that in a bit. But we've been exploring potential changes to the Broodlord. Well, okay, range increased to 11 from 9 was the previous range of the Broodlord. We've recently settled on a range increase to differentiate the unit further from other tech options Zerg has at that tier. Additionally, we're removing the passive ability of Frenzies now since it's not needed. And, well, I was about to explain, but for context, this ability was added back when ZVZ Defensive Swarm Host plus Mass Spore Caller was an issue. And now that that issue is gone, it is, we no longer see the need for this ability to protect Broodlords from Viper's Abduct. I like that. Now, increasing the range of the Broodlords. This, well, I guess this is going to tie together. I'm actually going to talk about the Lurker change. I'm not going to talk about the Broodlord change until I talk about the Lurker change, and I'll try to tie these together in a second. But Lurker damage changed from 30 damage to 20 plus 10 versus armored. We feel that the counter to mass Lurkers is too heavily leaning towards mass air, which is mostly true. We'd like to try out this change in order to see if we can get more ground-based interactions against the Lurker. The unique way Lurkers deal damage, it would be great to see some micro against players using Lurkers. Now, let me just talk about the direct effects of this damage change. The direct effects of this damage change. 1, it no longer takes 2 shots to kill a Marine. If it's 30 damage, Marines with combat shield have 55 HP. 2 lurker shots, dead Marine. That's a big deal. Taking 3 shots to kill a Marine is a big difference. And that will make bio a lot more effective. I think they're mostly looking at bio here, and they're realizing that bio right now, TVZ, is almost impossible against Zerg because lurkers are just so strong on the ground that it's almost impossible. Like, you need tanks and cyclones, and might as well go mech at that point. Might as well. So, but 20 plus 10 versus armored, I mean, this just means it does more damage to things like marauders and stuff like that, or the same damage, but more hardy units mostly. Things like Zerglings, well, Zerglings will still die in 2 hits. Of course, it leaves them with more HP than they had originally. And also Zealots are another one, as they are not armored units. Zealots and Adepts, technically. So I think they're really kind of looking to see more gateway-heavy and bio-heavy units against the Lurker. In ZVZ, I mean, Hydras are going to be more effective. Lings are going to be slightly more effective. It's actually going to take 4 shots instead of 3 to kill a Hydralisk at 80 HP. Wait, if they have +1 armor, they'll actually take 5 shots. That's a pretty significant difference. A lot of the time we were seeing in ZVZ. Now here's the big thing about the Lurker. Here's the big issue. It's not the damage output. It's about the range. It is defaulted with 9 range, which means it has 4 more range than a Marine. It has 3 more range than a Marauder and a Stalker. It has 4 more range than a Hydra until it gets its range upgrade, and then 3 more. That 3 range means the Lurker is already going to get its second attack going by the time you even close the distance if you're running straight towards it. Even if you're microwing, not only do you have to step side to side, but you have to step forward. And if there are 3-4 Lurkers and you're trying to micro against them, that's just too much range. That's the problem. The reason that Lurkers are so effective and that so many people are going for air and siege units is not because of how much damage the Lurkers are actually doing, but it's because of how quickly and easily they can zone out units. And that's a lot of the reason ZVZ has kind of gone to Lurker versus Lurker a lot of the time, because you just can't get any other ground armies in there. Ravagers have been heavily nerfed to the point of being almost completely ineffective and just a liability. Mutas are still a decent counter. Ultralists are good if you can get to them, but the Lurker just lets you stabilize so early. It's kind of like, well, it's almost like, I'm not going to say it's like the Swarm Host was. It's not nearly the same, but the Lurker is kind of like a Zerg siege tank right now. With the range it has, it outranges a Colossus with range, for example. It's almost impossible to get damage done on the ground. And changing the damage to bio, not to bio, but to non-armored units isn't going to change the range here. What I think is leave the damage and make it so the range upgrade takes a, small amount of time. Maybe even tie it in to the Hydra range upgrade. But it needs to take a little bit more time for Lurkers to get that 9 range. Otherwise, you make 3-4 Lurkers, and there's no way they're attacking you until they have, like, at least 3 base attack or anything like that. So this ties into the Broodlord here, which they're increasing to the range to 11, which is another siege unit. This one flies, though. It's pretty terrifying. But range increased to 11, which is almost that of a siege tank. And if you micro the Broodlords, you can get an extra range or 2 out of them, just kind of the way they work. But with Broodlords and Lurkers, it is going to feel a lot, well, pretty decently like it did. Well, these are both anti-ground units, remember. They're a little bit redundant, so that means you have an option to go for a longer range siege unit. If you go for a more air-oriented strat, or if you go on the ground, you got the Lurkers. I like that. Broodlords, I like this change. Why? Because Broodlords are a later game unit. They're a huge investment to get to, but if you use them, they should be very effective. They are very expensive at, I believe it's 250, 200 they come out to, or 250, 250. I'm not 100% sure, but they are very expensive. Getting a Spire, a Hive, and then Greater Spire is a long time and easily scouted. Unlike someone going quickly to lair for a Lurker Den or something like that. I think the Broodlord should be that endgame unit that could potentially just come out of nowhere, 4 or 5 Broodlords, and suddenly you got the game in your hands. Lurkers, on the other hand, I would rather they be, instead of a siege unit that kind of slows the game down, which they are, a quicker, maybe make them a little bit faster, maybe make them burrow slightly quicker, but the range on the Lurkers is what makes them less of a Zerg unit and more of just a siege unit, which is a completely different thing. That's just me ranting a little bit there. But now we got a couple more Protoss changes here, which is the upgraded zealot speed from 2.75 to 2.953. With the addition of the adept, the zealot's role has been reduced in the later stages of the game. Yes, I've noticed, and myself have been going for more adepts than zealots because they're actually tankier, they do range damage, and they have a little bit more micro potential than the zealot does. But to adjust for this, we decided to make a mid to late game buff for zealots that makes zealots to be a more ideal choice in certain situations compared to the adept. Alternatively, we could have toned down the effectiveness of the adept, but overall we agree with the community option that Protoss isn't as powerful as the other two races currently. The nice way of saying imbalance. So we felt this change was best. And I like it. I like it. Because charge lots, they're one of those units that a lot of players complain about, but a solid high-level player knows how to deal with charge lots. And remember, this isn't the charge aspect. This is just a straight movement aspect, which means they can move around. They can do run-bys better. They are quite quick, actually, at 2.9. They're already pretty fast, but these zealots are going to be... They're not going to be just sauntering along anymore. Even when they have speed, they start jogging, but now they're going to be running. That's a pretty significant movement speed increase, and it will distinguish them from the adept. I still think adepts are a solid army choice, because if you're moving with your army, you're not moving at 2.953 speed. You're moving as fast as your slowest important unit, which is probably going to be the Mothership nowadays. The Mothership, Colossi, Archon, stuff like that, which aren't that fast. But this is definitely going to help out with having a little bit more variety, and I like it. We'll have to see how it works out in the later stages, but I like it. Disruptor gains unit type Armored. The Disruptor survives for a bit too long, even when caught off guard, and we didn't want to do a big nerf to the unit yet, so we picked something small, and adding that plus armored damage units will deal more damage against them. It's also convenient that the unit looks armored, isn't it? I was actually surprised it wasn't armored at the start. But I gotta say, I don't know if the Disruptor needs a nerf. I mean, they're adding a lot of buffs to gateway things, just in general, because that is what people are complaining that the gateway units that they want. They want more aggression, so they want more gateway units, more lower cost units in multiple locations instead of one big, literal death ball like the Disruptor. I mean, it's not a big difference at all, because either you're going to get the damage done or you won't. Usually, I have to say, the Disruptor gets 1 to 2 shots if it's not with the main army. Otherwise, it's going to take its shot, and it's probably going to be dead right after that, unless something crazy happened. I think this is okay. I mean, the Disruptor is already not being used that often, because higher-level players can micro against it pretty easily. It's not a big difference either way. And it'll die a little bit quicker, so it's not a big change with the armored, but there's not too many units that would probably be killing it that are armored, actually. I mean, do extra to armored anyways, except for maybe Marauders is the biggest one. So, all right, closing. As a final update, we'd like to let you know about the areas we're testing internally. We're exploring more ways to give power to Terran bioplay, which makes sense. Bioplay right now, except against Protoss, who they've already admitted is quite weak in general. When they make these buffs to Protoss, it's probably going to bring Bio to a point where it's mediocre at best. It's already not amazing against Protoss, but it's definitely not going to get any better with these changes so far. Of course, these are all this is the beginning of the beta. We're still only like a month in. There's still a lot of months to go, so. We're trying new ability ideas for the Raven's Point Defense Drone and Ghost Snipe. I like the Snipe one. I want that. Maybe, let me think. I haven't actually thought about it. I forgot. I didn't remember reading this part, so. But the Point Defense Drone, I don't know. Maybe it can, like, explode and do an EMP or something. At some point, or, like, when it dies, it explodes and does an EMP. I think that'd be pretty cool. Instead of making it a unit that just stops the game from happening, it's actually something that creates action instead of negating it. But I don't know how that would actually work there. Just rename it something else, like Point Defense. It doesn't matter. Shock Drone. Fuck it. And Ghost Snipe. Now, what could you change with Ghost Snipe? I think they should just put it back to 50. Like, the reason they changed it before was because people were countering both Broodlords and Ultralists with Snipe. With the change to the Ultralist, if they want better bio play against Zerg and against Protoss, I think the best change is to bring Ghosts back. That'll be the most interesting way to do it, right? Think about it. If you can make Ghosts against all the energy units, you get the EMPs off. And also, if it did legitimate damage to massive units and to bio units. Like, if it did 50 damage, if you could one-shot a Marine with Snipe, or you could take an Ultralist down with just 2-3 Ghosts of sniping, I think that, because right now, the Ultralist, like, that's a big reason why bio doesn't work very well. It's just Lurkers and Ultras are just insanely good. You can't really close the distance. You need tanks, you need Cyclones, you need all these things that are definitely not bio. So I think Snipe is definitely an area that could be a really cool way to fix up bio, because it's a biological unit, and Ghosts, have you heard about nuclear missiles? I haven't in a while. Why don't we buff nukes? Why don't we do that? Oh, I want to do that. Let's get some more nukes. I don't even care if it's balanced. Just more nukes for a little while. Come on. Just please. Anyway, moving on. We're developing the new Terran unit. We're getting comfortable with the air unit we've been exploring. Here's how it currently operates. 2 attack modes. So it's a mech unit like any other, well, of course, but like any other mech unit, it transforms in ways. Fast movement with splash damage versus air, which is good. Because Vikings are terrible against large amounts of air units. Vikings are kind of a zoning unit a lot more. They're made to take out a couple medevacs. They're made to take out a Broodlord or something like that. They're not made to take out 25 mutas, or they're not made to take out 10 phoenixes or something. So that's good. Given more options against mutas. Maybe something cheaper that you can make as bio instead of Thors, which are just, like, you have this big, fast, agile army, and you got a micro against mutas, so you make this big-ass Thor just to slam in the middle of everything, which makes no sense. But that's kind of what you do nowadays. I mean, Thors are badass, but it doesn't really fit the style of bio, if that makes sense. It's unless you're, like, using medevacs to move them around, but it's a different tech direction than you usually want to go with bio. And now here's an interesting part. Can enter a stationary mode where it changes to attack versus ground. This attack targets an area where any units within that area receive high single target damage. What do you mean single target? I guess it's not splash damage. Everything receives the same amount of damage is what I assume. So what they're saying here is we want to counter lurkers, and mostly lurkers. And also a good zoning thing. That's another thing bio is lacking. This does not seem like a mech unit to me. This seems like a bio support unit, which is what they were saying. At first, it seemed like they were talking about a mech unit, but if this costs not more than, if it 200, I think, would be a decent cost for something like this that's pretty effective. Get a second starport and be pumping 3 or 4 of these. Let's not call them Valkyries, but let's kind of call them Valkyries, or whatever the Brood War anti-air / ground unit was. But it's looking better than I thought. Like, I was kind of like, I don't know about this before, but the actually targeting ground thing, that could be interesting. I think it'll be interesting. It's looking good. This is all bio support they're doing here, by the way. The bullet points are all related here, interestingly. Well, not interestingly, but that was pretty subtle of them, right? But we're doing our best to get this new unit out to you as soon as possible. In addition to this new unit, we'll be once again splitting apart mech and air upgrades at the armory. That's not a bad idea. We believe the starport is more an all-around in its capabilities now, and we're seeing a lot of cool things in internal playtests. With the mech upgrades being split out, Terran players will need to more fully choose which tech paths they'd like to commit to. That means they don't want any more of your goddamn Thors in their bio armies, all right? They want you to have, like, Sky Bio or something, which I think is a lot more Terran-y, if that makes sense. That was probably the worst word I could have ever used. This more like. There, I like that better. But as always, please remember. Well, just to summarize, I like all the changes at the top here, like the in-game clock, automated tournament game length, stalemate limits, stuff like that. Obviously, going to be adjusted. Mothership core and mothership changes are going to be pretty cool, and probably needed. The stasis ward change is kind of silly, but I understand where they're coming from. Broodlords, I like it. Zealot speed, I like it. Lurker damage, not addressing the problem. Disruptor gains unit type armor, not a big deal either way. And the Terran bio support unit in the air, that will probably be pretty cool. So, well, let me know your thoughts. Like I said, this took longer than, well, I wanted to try to do it in 10 minutes, but that did not happen. But thank you guys for watching. Make sure to leave your comments. And, of course, you can talk with me on stream and anything like that. Probably be playing beta the next few days after this. This will become less than relevant in a few days anyways. So thank you guys for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, and, of course, leave your thoughts in the comments below. See you guys later.